I like the onion analogy. It's like
Yeah.
we're probably more on the Shrek angle of being the cake, so we make it look good and tasty and then attract people to want it. So. So thanks for joining us, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
Really, really excited to kind of talk around some of the topics that we've been discussing outside of the podcast space. But we've worked with Tech East for a number of years now. So really great opportunity to sit down with yourself as COO and really discuss and explore the makeup and the dichotomy of the tech sector, particularly in the east of England, or what we're affectionately calling as the tech diamond of Suffolk, Norfolk, Essex and Cambridgeshire.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of first question is for those that maybe haven't had any exposure to Tech East, founded in 2016
That's right.
with the agenda of interconnecting and improving communication, I guess, between, or at least highlighting the value of the tech sector in this region.
Totally. Yeah, and I can't believe it's been nearly 6 years. I mean, 5 for me. Yeah, absolutely. Tech East was created primarily because this part of the world, the east of England, has a bit of an identity problem. I think when you're looking nationally, the rest of the UK and internationally, where is the east of England?
Yeah. Unless
you come from around here, you might not even know that Suffolk's in that bulge on the side. Yep. Ditto Norfolk. So we had a bit of a kind of identity problem. Everybody knows about Cambridge. Cambridge is an internationally recognized cluster, whether it's in life sciences or digital tech. But Ipswich, Martlesham, we're just down the road from BT.
Yep.
3,500 people there working in tech, and there's 150 plus companies on Adastral Park. But who knows about that?
Yeah.
And actually, I think the conclusion that was reached pretty rapidly, and part of what triggered this was when the Tech Nation report came out in 2015, was just that lack of recognition for Norfolk, for Suffolk, for the east of England. And there was a very clear understanding. Anyone who's close to the sector, close to the tech industry, knows how much fantastic stuff we've got going on, whether it's in startups, whether it's in businesses that are scaling, whether international investment, acquisitions, mergers, blah, blah, blah. But no one knew about it.
Yeah.
And, certainly over the last, 10 years or so in the UK, a lot of the attention's been going towards the north of England. Manchester's a great success story. Bristol's got a fantastic story to tell around tech. See London, number two or three tech ecosystem in the world behind Silicon Valley and New York. East of England is no slouch. But in order to tell the story, the way I would describe it, and you've talked about a tech diamond, we've got this diamond, but it's maybe 100 miles north to south and 100 miles east to west. How do you kind of almost mentally compress that down into something that looks more like a cluster?
Yeah.
At a cluster where, and one of the definitions of a cluster is obviously where businesses can work with other businesses and collaborate.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're here to do. We're here to kind of tell that story, and not just tell the story, but actually help compress that cluster into a meaningful area where businesses can collaborate and feel confident they're in the right place, to do business.
Do you see that as a challenge or an opportunity though? Because the geographic spread, we've got some very large metropolitan hubs with some incredible businesses across a broad spectrum of industry sectors, from biochemistry, biotech, cybersecurity, machine learning, AI, digital marketing. But whereas you might have Bristol or Manchester, as a recognised cluster, we are more disparate. We've got communities in Ipswich, communities in Norfolk and Norwich, and then Cambridgeshire is a part of that diamond.
It is,
But Cambridge very much has its own identity as well.
It does, there is a big opportunity if you can get it right, because certainly, even in Cambridge, there would be a recognition by investors and by other and other interested parties that Cambridge is still a subscale cluster compared with, say, Boston.
Yeah.
So it's only good. It's only good for Cambridge and for everyone else to be able to combine the strength in numbers, the strength in combining combining interests. So, for example, there's a Cambridge-Norwich Tech Corridor which tries to help do that. There's Tech East, which tries to tell that regional story. There are collaborations, and I've just been looking at one this morning between Norfolk and Suffolk. We've got a local enterprise partnership that covers Norfolk and Suffolk. So, it's good to combine things because you can be too parochial about these things. If we start talking about, the Ipswich Tech Cluster, for example, well, there's a limit to what's in there.
Yeah.
In terms of opportunity, there's opportunity for all of those places to advance. And I think one of the key opportunities is, and I would say this about any part of the world, is to go with the grain of what else is going on in the region. Yeah. So, for example, in Suffolk and the east of England, we've got this incredible opportunity around clean energy, whether that's offshore renewable, so wind farms, whether it's solar, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's nuclear new build, whatever it is. Yeah. And those industries aren't always talking to the tech community as closely and effectively as they could be. So that's one opportunity, is to reduce the space, to narrow the gap between different industry sectors, get people talking to each other, get people to collaborate. That way you get innovation, you get new startups, you get there are hybrid skills that are emerging. So for example, in the life sciences, something like bioinformatics, which is decoding the human genome. Yeah. Well, you can't do that without computers. No. You can't do that without data, and increasingly you can't do that without AI. But I think
I'm pretty sure I saw a Wellcome exhibition where they decoded the human genome and they printed it into tomes of books. Yeah. And there was something like an entire wall of like 1s and 0 like toned books. So it can be done, physically, not necessarily just digitally. But so interestingly, like you touched on a couple of different industry sectors there. I've always found it fascinating, and part of the reason I got involved in digital marketing was is we as a sector are involved in all of these different industry sectors. There's incredible things being created. We work with businesses that are involved in, the fringe and the development of cybersecurity initiatives, innovation around biochemistry or renewable energy or submersibles and things like that. Yeah. But they all need, us to help bridge the gap between creating these wonderful things and then promoting those wonderful things.
Yes.
So, given that, I think it was Tech Nation said that in 2021 it was £29.4 billion worth of investment in tech businesses in the UK alone. Yeah. What sectors or what particular disciplines have you seen grow most prominently over the last couple of years since you've been involved?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's interesting. I think there are sectors that have grown, and there are probably sectors that have either stagnated or start to go backwards. And then there are areas where there's quite a lot of hype, but not a lot of reality. So
let's break that down then. Okay.
So in terms of growth, anything to do with AI. Yeah. AI is growth. Health. Yeah. Healthcare, digital health is growth. Net zero, clean energy, clean tech, green tech, whatever you want to call it, is growth. Agri-tech is growth. In terms of sort of things that have probably
been left behind,
going behind. I mean, I think there's always an interesting. And fintech, obviously. Fintech. Oh god, now we're getting
despite
into
things like blockchain and.
Oh no. I'll recast that in terms. So in terms of growth, anything to do with artificial intelligence and machine learning is clearly growing, because that's about things getting more efficient. It's automation. It's handling large data sets. That's running through every industry. Yeah. Health, digital health, and that sort of convergence between the life sciences and tech is growing. FinTech is growing. And I'd say regionally, agri-tech is another big one. Yeah. And then probably the other big sector that's been growing globally hugely, and it's particularly relevant at the moment given the situation with Ukraine and Russia, cybersecurity.
Yes.
They're all growing. That doesn't mean that locally they're all growing at the same rate, because actually if you read across that list, we're really strong in AI. We're really strong in health tech. We're clearly really strong in agri-tech. Cybersecurity there's probably not quite as much of a tech ecosystem around cybersecurity, although we are really pleased to see the launch of Cyber East, for example, recently, to try and pull that together. See, Darktrace had a big IPO, Cambridge-based, but there's not lots of cybersecurity startups in Suffolk and Norfolk. The stuff that we have got in cyber is probably less visible. There's a lot that's embedded in BT, and there's a lot in academia. So whether it's UEA or the University of Suffolk, but I wouldn't say cybersecurity is like a high-profile niche for the region.
It's interesting, and that's where the profile side of things come, because there's lots of exciting things happening behind the iron curtain of Adastral Park, right?
Yeah.
It's the innovation hub and things. They're probably 5 years ahead of the technology we're going to see emerge, right?
Barbed wire fence.
The barbed wire fence.
Yeah.
But from a cybersecurity perspective, actually, Strategic, we've had a lot of interest, and we now work with quite a few specialist data and cybersecurity organisations. Without kind of naming names, more predominantly based in the Cambridgeshire region.
Yes.
And part of that taps into this, they've not necessarily stagnated. They're there, but they're not as prominent in the space. And that's because of the disconnectivity of the fact that they're doing and creating wonderful, great things, but then they equally internally find it difficult to articulate what it is they do, their value, and amplify that to the wider marketplace.
Yeah.
Because again, like digital marketing, it can apply to every industry, whether it's agri-tech, whether it's biochemistry, we can market those things. But the same with cybersecurity is that is a particular tech subject that is relevant now to every different part of, the tech ecosystem.
Yeah.
They all need to protect their data.
Yeah.
So it is maybe it's a marketing and a PR kind of challenge than perhaps it is an investment and a growth.
I think so. I think there's also, an argument that cybersecurity is a bit like the cloud. It's a big kind of broad cross-cutting technology set that will, end up with a few big players. Darktrace will probably be one of them. And then a lot of startups that again get subsumed into the likes of Microsoft or AWS because it essentially becomes, you remember your old sort of Norton antivirus software.
Can't get rid of it.
It kind of sits there in the background. It's like an ingredient to your overall, digital life. Whereas I think with marketing and MarTech, for example, I think professionals have been much more content to use lots and lots of different solutions for best of breed type things. And those brands, you've got someone like HubSpot, everyone knows HubSpot now, right? But there's lots of kind of product, SaaS platforms and marketing. And marketeers will happily use maybe half a dozen. Whereas in the corporate environment, it tends to be, you turn on your machine, you're in, say, Microsoft environment, and then you've maybe got a few other kind of mission critical things, Oracle or whatever, that tend to get used, plus the point solution. So that is right about branding and marketing. Some of it is just structural. And I think what I would describe as being, in terms of the overall picture, east of England is business to business when it comes to tech. It's not business to consumer. Interestingly, there are some great B2C brands in the east of England. I think we always talk about Adnams, but Adnams is a great example. Or Lotus. They're incredible B2C
Internationally known.
Internationally known. Consumers recognise them. That's not so true of our tech sector. And if you're not B2C, you are inherently less visible. I would say that's a
I completely agree. And that's certainly a challenge that a lot of organisations come to us with is, we have this market-leading, innovative, like on the fringe of, international development projects or pieces of software, but we just don't know how to get it out into the market. So it is a PR challenge for them, and that's part of our involvement with Tech East as a community, is because we're not necessarily creating as many things as the tech sector are, but we're very, very good at helping amplify and project the wonderful things that the tech sector are doing. So that's kind of our agenda and objective within this.
And I think in that sense, Strategic and Tech East completely aligned, because we know B2B, is massive, and there's a big enough market there globally for that to be an amazing opportunity. But just being, I think, recognizing that is what we're good at is important.
It's helping all the organisations tap into other things. So you've mentioned we've talked about like government initiatives with boot camps, grant funding. How is that kind of evolving, and what you're seeing with the organisations?
Well, I think it's evolving constantly in the sense that government is always going to be in a position where it needs to kind of introduce new schemes into the market. With COVID, for example, things like bounce back loans or future fund. The boot camps initiative, those have all been kind of responsive and reactive to evolving events in the wider world and society. The problem is that sometimes there'll be a load of programs that have started and haven't finished. And then you're trying to promote and signpost people to lots of new things that have come along since. Then things end, they run out of funding, there's no continuity. So actually that's one of the reasons why a sort of tech cluster organization is useful. Because we kind of have our eye on all of these things, whether they're coming through a LEP or a district council, central government, Innovate UK, Tech Nation, whoever it might be. We can at least do a job of work to distill all that down into set messages for businesses, so they don't have to keep knocking on different doors. But it's difficult to keep up. It is more fragmented than I think it needs to be. I think the tech sector in the UK is underinvested in compared with other countries, notably places like China. So we have to work hard on limited resources and capacity to help businesses find the right things. And I think that there are a few areas so in grant funding, the problem is often that there aren't that many grants available. Grants are good, right? But there aren't that many available when you break it down. So that's not as much of a challenge as, say, something like skills and talent, where there are a list as long as your arm of programs in schools around career inspiration, STEM programs, inclusion and diversity programs, stuff around trying to get more people doing GCSE computer science or T levels. There are apprenticeships. There's short courses, there's degrees, there's conversion courses, there's boot camps, there's everything under the sun. But for the business, from the business's point of view, it can be confusing, and some of those form filling exercises are not easy to do. And some of those programs, take apprenticeships, have not been particularly easy for SMEs and small businesses to access. So the challenge is often actually to champion the voice of the small business into government. That way, there's an opportunity to cut through. But it's not easy, and I don't think we've solved the problem yet in the UK. There's still a massive tech skills gap, and there will continue to be one until we can get some more fundamental structural change in early years education, I think.
And what's your view on the startup part of that then? Because arguably, and I think it was a recent Tech Nation report, they're saying that the UK has got kind of like one of the largest growth area for unicorn companies, so privately invested tech startups, for example, that are valued over £1 billion within their first couple of years of setup. We're seeing more of that in the tech region for us, in the diamond. So what's been your experience, particularly at the growth sectors that are creating these new businesses?
Well, I mean, I think so that's an interesting topic. So I think a lot of that is to do obviously with valuations and the way that investor, sort of structural changes in the investment market. So one big factor in that has been that sort of traditional digital tech investors, VCs, have increasingly started to invest in the life sciences, particularly at the sort of digital end of the life sciences, but also getting into some of those more sort of biotech and drug discovery things. So if you're a business that's on the edge of those two things, you're likely to do well, like CMR Surgical in Cambridge, it was had a massive, kind of record-breaking raise. They're a unicorn. And there will be more unicorns. The unicorns will they'll be in big, growing, it's the usual stuff. Big, growing, rich, accessible markets where there's huge opportunities. And increasingly, that's kind of like deep tech related. So where there'll be some intellectual property that's protected and therefore can't be copied, where there are very complex algorithms, where there's a sort of strong science base to it. I think those are where the unicorns are coming. The unicorns aren't now tending to come on the sort of more low-hanging fruit around. We've got Facebook, Instagram, whatever. TikTok did well. But where's the next? There will be another one, but I don't think it's going to come from Suffolk or Norfolk.
It's interesting because so you mentioned TikTok and the advent, and that's a marketing platform for us. So we have to stay ahead of the curve. Much like techies, you help organisations navigate, the forests of where they need to be focusing their attention for things like, demystifying the grant applications. It's our job to demystify the marketing. Where should my brand be? What platforms using what to promote in what way? And the TikTok argument I always found fascinating because it wasn't necessarily that they'd earmarked a new way of doing something. All it was is it was an acknowledgement of the changing consumer or buyer behaviours based on the fact that we all live in an attention economy now, right? So it's how much time do you spend on what platform and how? And all they did was they identified the change in consumer behaviour and then jump on that ahead of time, and then they managed to capture the audience at a time when it was right because it's conducive with how people want to engage and consume content. Right. And then you see all of the slightly slower, larger, lumbering organisations like Facebook go, we really should be copying this mechanism. And I see a lot of that in the tech sector as well.
Yeah, lots.
So I don't think it's necessarily say that the ones that were there first are going to be the ones that will necessarily flourish.
No.
It's the ones that are coming up through the tech sector are going, I see what they did well, but also what didn't work quite as well, and then using that to inform their next steps of evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about execution. The idea is not the thing. It's how you take it. So there's that classic thing in business. Fast follower.
Yeah.
There are lots of examples in the UK of businesses, and particularly in tech, that have effectively copied something that's worked in the US.
Yep.
And and have done incredibly well in the UK and potentially UK and Europe by building something that is a direct copy of something that's happened already somewhere else in the world.
But marketed in the right way.
And marketed in the right way. And people like, especially, people like a homegrown product sometimes.
Yeah. So now we're in the realms of predictions, actually, because we touched on this before, right? So you made some predictions at the tail end of last year. So it's like, how many of these were actually on the nail, or where are we at?
Oh God, yeah, right. Okay, well, I made 8 predictions at the end of last year. One of which I think has not proved to be the case, but that's not a bad.
No, that's a good hit rate.
So I think the first prediction, and probably the most important one, is that that net zero, the drive to net zero, presents an enormous opportunity for new startups to form, and for the tech industry and the tech sector regionally to play its part in helping through digitalization and data and AI and all of those things to help the rest of industry decarbonize, because this is important, right? And COP26 was a big trigger for that. But I mean, everywhere I look now, it's a net zero program here. It's digital adoption and net zero. It's road to net zero. Blah, blah, blah. And I think the relevant bit here is that we have some real strength and capabilities in the region around parts of net zero. So clean energy I talked about, agri-food and agri-tech. The sort of how we're going to feed ourselves in future. We've got a new Freeport coming, Freeport East. We'll have significant sort of hydrogen production capabilities. We hope, but right now the tech sector and and those other sectors aren't always talking. They're not always around the same table. And one of the ways you get those industries around the same table is when you get people from those two sectors working together on a startup. On a startup which has a product or a service that actually solves a real customer problem. And so my prediction is we'll see more of those startups. I think there will be more. I think government will engineer it such that there will be more programs to encourage it. Certainly organisations like Tech East are doing lots around this, so are people like Chambers of Commerce. So that's kind of prediction 1. And I think this is going to be the kind of like the hottest thing for the region.
Prediction 2.
Yeah, I mean, prediction 2 is about investment. So the reality at the moment is that if you're a company based locally in the east of England, what are your options to raise investment? And I'm talking about private equity investment. So whether it's for seed or beyond. So there are local angel investor networks, there are local angels, there are sort of small pots of money available sometimes through, the public sector or through universities that are kind of perhaps more grants or convertible loans. But if you want to access big VC, and that's not for everyone, but it is probably something that really ambitious companies, especially if they're in the deep tech world, are going to have to do. You do need to travel a little way.
Yeah.
There's a little bit in Cambridge. There's a lot in London, and then there's plenty available internationally. But I think it's a double-edged sword. This is a beautiful part of the world to live.
Yeah.
And part of the value of being here is not having to hop on a train or get in the car, go to London every day, which is something I used to do for work. So you just have to be prepared to go that little bit further. If you think of it as like an onion, and here we're in the little center of the onion, you've got to go 1 or 2 layers out. So it's a mindset thing. And again, where Tech East can help is putting people in touch with some of those things that are kind of like 1 or 2 layers out the onion. I think there'll be more research. My prediction is that there'll be more research published this year, which will indicate that there is an access to finance problem in the UK regions, including the east of England. And I think government will need to do something about that, especially if it wants to see lots of new deep tech investment.
I like the onion analogy. It's like we're probably more on the Shrek angle of being the cake, so we make it look good and tasty and then attract people to want it. So. So I think there was a couple other predictions.
Yeah, a couple of others. I mean, just trying to remember what they all were. I mean, I think on the skills one, I mean, my prediction is that there will be more and more initiatives trying to help close that skills gap.
I think this is an interesting topic. We discussed it with various other people. We had Matthew C. Applegate from Creative Computing Club on, and he's had some interesting predictions, particularly in the development space, right? But this is a conversation that's ongoing for businesses, particularly in the tech sector and digital marketing, is that the skills gap is huge at the moment because the demand for those skill sets has outpaced the availability of the talent in the space. So therefore, then the talent that is available are very much looked after and appreciated by the organisations they work with, and it's become a buyer's economy, right? Yes. They can work where they want to work remotely in a digital environment, and basically get London or Silicon Valley salaries in this space. But equally, one of the interesting pieces is as the evolution of technology, particularly in the tech sector, goes, is we're almost creating the need for roles that didn't exist a couple of years ago because the technology wasn't there. So how can the education sector then actually support and keep pace with the vocational needs of these sectors? It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation.
It's very difficult. It's difficult, and it is quite hard for especially like universities and also colleges and schools that are bound up in sort of in some cases quite tight and restricted sort of policy frameworks and funding frameworks to be able to be agile. So I think the universities and colleges and so on, they need to listen to business. They need to get closer to business, and they probably need to really think about how they co-create their curriculum with businesses, which is not always the traditional way. I think that businesses themselves will take matters into their own hands, whether it's creating their own academies internally, doing their own upskilling programs and reskilling and getting more people into the industry. I think the private sector's got a massive role to play. And I think sometimes it's very hard for small businesses to find the time to really develop their talent, not just their existing talent, but their talent pipeline. But that is increasingly a differentiator for successful businesses, and the rest is the ones who put that time in. So, and I know, for example, that StrategiQ, invest heavily in this dimension. I know a lot of other marketing businesses and agencies have done the same. I think tech businesses are doing the same. But I think the idea that the traditional education providers have got a kind of monopoly or a stranglehold on this is increasingly not the case. And apprenticeships are clearly a great example of that, partnership between business and education, but yet apprenticeships haven't really taken off. So what's going on? For me, the big thing here is that businesses need to step up to the plate more. Whether they're the big players, the BTs and Avivas and so on, or whether they are SMEs like yourselves, and that through that, irrespective of what government chooses to fund, that will be the biggest shift.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's very much. We have a lot of conversations with organisations, particularly startups in the tech sector, is that they reference our culture and our focus on people a lot.
Yeah.
And that's the reason behind it, is because yes, there's some great initiatives there, but you have to take charge of your own destiny. You know, and demonstrating that there's opportunities to learn on the job, you know, as the technology and the platforms and the solutions are evolving in such a way where actually you don't need to necessarily go through those formal educations, because by the time you've gone through that program, that thing you've studied is almost redundant and it's moved on another 5 years. So I guess sort of closing question then. So what do you see as the biggest opportunity in the tech sector as your kind of closing prediction for the next 6 to 12 months?
So what, tech sector regionally or tech sector?
I would say tech sector as a whole.
I mean, the biggest opportunity always is for the sector and the businesses to make themselves accessible and available to other businesses that want to innovate. So, you know, we can probably both remember, you know, there's the IT crowd, right? The stereotype of the IT person is usually a bloke, usually a bit weird, introverted, you know, hard to, you know, isn't always the easiest person to talk to in the
socially
business.
awkward.
Socially awkward, you know, some of those things. Now, some of the, you know, there are reasons why a lot of people working in the industry, you know, might display some of those behaviours. That's not a criticism. No. But I think, you know, for the industry to be attractive and for a career in tech to be attractive to young women, to diverse communities, the industry has to change. So it has to become 100%. much, much more diverse, attractive, accessible, less jargon driven, and more solution, more thinking about the customer. So for me, the biggest opportunity is actually to build more of those capabilities into the tech sector. Yeah. And that means having a more diverse workforce. It means having more kind of arts rather than just sciences people. I mean, I imagine as a marketing agency, you've got a bit of both. You've got you've probably got some data scientists and some, you know.
Data science is a huge opportunity. And again, it's like, how do you make that anecdotally sexy, right? Before it's like just digging around in spreadsheets. Yeah. But the value of and the availability of the data and being able to analyze, scrutinize, and draw, you know, actionable conclusions from that is a huge opportunity for the sector. From a marketing perspective, we try and look as a creative and a technical brain. So we're using left and right to be able to ultimately inform decisions that are going to help grow businesses. Yeah. But for us, it all comes down to take a step back, challenge the thinking, and ultimately use the data you have in a way that's going to inform, you know, taking the next natural steps in the right way. And if that means bringing somebody else to the table to get an alternative view, then there can only be value from that. Absolutely.
Technology skills, creative skills, communication skills, people skills, that's what makes up a successful business, a successful individual in business, in professional life. And so the tech sector has to kind of embrace more of that other side of the brain. And then the rest of the industry kind of needs to kind of figure out that it needs that tech bit in order to be successful. And therein lies, you know, maybe the biggest opportunity for the 21st century is to bring those two things really together. And I think Suffolk and Norfolk and the east of England and the Tech Diamond are the sort of place where that's happening probably most in the UK. Yeah.